set? Okay. We will call to order the Budget and Audit Committee meeting for February 3rd, 2026, and welcome to those of you who have joined us this morning. You are welcome to participate in committee's deliberations today. If you want to do that on any item on our agenda, please fill out a speaker form and deliver that to the clerk here at the front of the chambers. We'll make sure to recognize you on the item in which you are interested. Please remember that you have 2 minutes for public comment on any item, and you can see the clock tick down, so keep your eye on the clock if you're commenting, so you make sure to finish your remarks within the allotted time and get to say everything that you want to share with us. With that, I think we probably need to call the roll, don't we?
Sure. Councilmember Talamontes?
Here.
Councilmember Maple?
Here.
Councilmember Guerra?
Here.
And Chair Dickinson?
Here.
You have a quorum.
We have a quorum, and Councilmember Vice Mayor, if you would lead us in the acknowledgement and the pledge.
Please rise for the opening acknowledgments in honor of Sacramento's indigenous people and tribal lands. To the original people of this land, the Nisenan people, the Southern Maidu, Valley and Plains Miwok, Patwin Wintun people, and the people in the Wilton Rancheria, Sacramento's only federally recognized tribe. May we acknowledge and honor the Native people who came before us today and still walk beside us today on these ancestral lands by choosing to gather together today in the active practice of acknowledgement and appreciation for Sacramento's indigenous people's history, contributions, and lives. Thank you. Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Someday.
Thank you. All right. We have 4 items on our consent agenda. Any member of the committee wish to speak on any of the consent items? And do we have any members of the public who wish to address us on the consent items?
I have no members of the public to speak on consent.
All right, in that case, we have a motion and a second to adopt the consent items. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say no, and abstentions. That's unanimous. We're rolling now. Okay, we're going to go on to item 5. This, our auditor. The 24-25 baseline funding verification for the Sacramento Children's Fund. Good morning, welcome.
So, good morning, members of Budget and Audit. I'm Farishta Arari, their city auditor. With me today is Joe Fleming, who was the lead on this project, but as many of you guys know, this was a office-wide effort for our office. The recommendation that is before you is to accept the city auditor's fiscal year baseline funding verification for the Sacramento Children's Fund and forward it to the city council for approval. This is our second year conducting the baseline funding verification, and the city charter requires that we conduct this analysis annually. Now I'm going to pass it over to Joe to continue the presentation for our fiscal year 25 report and the next item as well.
Good morning, members of the Budget and Audit Committee. My name is Joe Fleming. I am a Senior Fiscal Policy Analyst with the Office of the City Auditor. The Sacramento Children and Youth Health and Safety Act, also known as Measure L, was passed by voters in 2022. This established City Charter Section 120, the Sacramento Children's Fund, and required the city auditor to calculate and publish the baseline funding amount by December 31st, 2023. The city auditor fulfilled this obligation and calculated the baseline funding amount to be $22.9 million. Each year, the city auditor is required to verify whether the baseline funding amount was expended in the prior fiscal year. The objective of this project was to fulfill the requirement outlined in Section 120, subsection E1C of the Sacramento City Charter by verifying that the baseline funding amount of $22.9 million was expended in fiscal year 24-25. The scope of this project was city expenditures for fiscal year 24-25 or those that were made between July 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2025. To achieve our objective, we researched programs that departments identified as youth-related. To confirm that a program qualified toward the baseline funding verification, we conducted an analysis to verify its compliance with the criteria that were laid out in the city charter. We reviewed expenditures from those programs in fiscal year 24-25, net of program revenues, confirming their source as unrestricted general fund revenue, aligning the program with one or more fund goals, and verifying that expenditures did not fall into prohibited categories. In certain situations, the most appropriate method for determining the correct allocation of youth-related expenditures was to rely on management estimates. In specific cases, we employed management's estimations to determine the appropriate distribution of administrative costs among the eligible youth programs. Additionally, we depended on the management assessments of youth program participation to isolate and allocate the youth-related portion within those programs that had only a partial youth component. These estimates were based on available program attendance records, and it's important to note that due to limited time and resources, we did not conduct an independent audit to validate the accuracy or completeness of the management's estimations. After viewing the City of Sacramento's youth programs and related expenditures for fiscal year 24-25, we have verified that the city expended the baseline funding amount for the Sacramento Children's Fund. This slide summarizes department's youth-related programs, the fund goals that were fulfilled by the program operations, and the eligible program expenditures that counted towards the fiscal year 24-25 baseline funding verification. In determining the eligibility of expenditures in accordance with the baseline funding criteria, some expenditures from the youth-related programs were excluded, and the common reasons for reducing the amount as eligible towards the baseline funding verification include that program had an ineligible funding source, the expenditure fell into a prohibited category, or a program had only a partial youth component. Guidance from last year's presentation to City Council dictated that in odd years, the city auditor will publish an analysis of expenditures up to the baseline funding amount, and in even years publish a full accounting of the eligible youth-related expenditures across all departments. As the current analysis is for the odd year of fiscal year 24-25, we have published the relevant eligible youth-related expenditures from the departments only needed to meet that baseline funding amount. And for that reason, this table doesn't necessarily encompass all of the youth program offerings in the city of Sacramento or all the youth programs listed within these 7 departments. As the city auditor's responsibilities established by Measure L require 2 annual reports, we have updated our webpage as a central location for the council, management, and for the public to have access to these reports. As outlined in the charter, our primary responsibility is to ensure that the baseline funding requirement has been met. And we want to reiterate that there are other expenditures in other departments and within those departments that were listed that would be considered as eligible toward the baseline funding verification. And next year's report will include a more thorough analysis of expenditures comprising all of the youth programs across departments and all of the eligible program expenditures. Thank you for your time. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Joe, thank you for that. For the committee, I don't have anyone signed up. Anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, you may skate on this one. Okay, do we have any member of the public who wishes to address?
I have no public comments on this item.
All right, the recommendation is to accept the verification of the baseline funding and send this to the full council for approval.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Maple. Seconded by the Vice Mayor. If there's nothing further, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And we'll go to item 6, which is the audited cannabis business operations tax amount for the Sacramento Children's Fund. And looks like you're ready to go, Joe.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to you.
So, good morning, members of the Budget and Audit Committee. I'm Joe Fleming, a Senior Fiscal Policy Analyst within the Office of the City Auditor. The recommendation that is before you is to accept the City Auditor's fiscal year 24-25 audited cannabis business operations tax amount for the Sacramento Children's Fund and forward to the City Council for approval. This is our second year auditing the CBOT revenue, and the city charter requires that we audit this number annually. As I mentioned in my last presentation, the Sacramento Children and Youth and Health and Safety Act, also known as Measure L, was passed by voters in 2022. This established City Charter Section 120, the Sacramento Children's Fund, and requires the city auditor to publish an audited amount of CBOT each fiscal year. The general fund equivalent of 40% of the audited amount of CBOT revenue is allocated to the Children's Fund. The objective of this project was to fulfill the requirement outlined in Section 120, subsection C2 of the Sacramento City Charter by publishing an audited amount of CBOT revenue for the prior fiscal year. We determined that contracting with the city's external auditors would be the most efficient use of resources to complete this audit. As such, the external auditors completed the audit in accordance with the generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. The results of the audit show that for fiscal year 24-25, the CBOT revenue came in at $22,609,932. And during the budget process each year, the city makes an estimate of the CBOT revenues and budgets an amount equivalent to 40% of the estimated CBOT revenue to be transferred from the general fund to the Sacramento Children's Fund. During the fiscal year-end process, the finance department performs a true-up to ensure that the contribution to the Children's Fund reflects 40% of the actual CBOT revenue for that fiscal year. Numbers on the right side of the slide show an example of this process. For fiscal year 24-25, the estimated CBOT revenue was approximately $23.3 million, which was unchanged from the budgeted fiscal year 23-24 amount. Therefore, approximately $9.3 million in general fund dollars was allocated to the Children's Fund. The audited amount of the CBOT revenue was approximately $22.6 million, coming in below estimates. Therefore, the Finance Department did a true-up to reduce revenues by approximately $280,000 from the Children's Fund. And the total amount contributed to the Children's Fund for fiscal year 24-25 was approximately $9.04 million. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks again, Joe. I don't have anyone looking to speak. Any questions or comments?
Thank you,
Yes.
Chair.
Councilmember Maple.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's always really interesting to me. Do we have a sense, I know you're looking at the actual numbers, but do you get a sense of why we were below, or are we just seeing that the industry is kind of just struggling a little bit, or there's some reasoning behind that?
I don't think our office would be able to opine on the difference between budgeted and actuals. That may be a question that finance may be able to answer.
Well, I think we're talking to them next, so maybe I'll reserve my question for them. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Joe? Okay, we have a motion to accept the audit and send it on to the council. We have a second as well. Any public comment? No public comment. Boy, you are living right. Okay. If there's nothing further, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. And any abstentions? None. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the warm-up is over. All right, we're going to take items 7 and 8 together, the 25-26 budget update and proposed adjustments, and the 24-25 annual comprehensive financial report. So, Pete?
Great, thank you. Good morning.
Quad, right? You and the
The
team.
whole budget team here.
Yeah, okay.
Good morning, Chair, council members, members of the public. I'm Pete Coletto, the city's finance director. Joining me is Mirthala Santizo, our budget manager. And as the chair mentioned, we always live in 3 years in municipal finance, the prior year, the current year, and the budget year. And so we're going to talk about all three of those things today. So we're going to start with our fiscal year 24-25 year-end results. I have good news. The results are positive. So we kind of broke it down in the chart that you see in front of you. So our operating results were positive by a little less than $3 million. That next line you'll see is our investments fair market gain. And, you know, we talked about this when we were doing year-end close last year as well. And so what this is from is, you know, a few years ago when inflation spiked and interest rates spiked, the value, the paper value of our investment portfolio went down. And so governmental accounting standards say we need to recognize that unrealized loss at year end. But the Treasurer's Office has done a very good job managing the cash flow. We didn't actually sell those securities at a loss. And the great thing about bonds is, you know, if you can hold on to them, you'll get your money back. And so we've gotten our money back. The Treasurer's Office has invested in new market rate securities, and we're able to pay ourselves back for those unrealized losses. So that is the $12 million that you see up there. So that was $14.8 million positive. The next line you see there is $7.1 million negative. And so what that is from is we had an arbitrated settlement with the SPOA, the Police Officers Union, and when council heard that item, they approved using prior year savings, if there was any, to move into this current year to pay for that increase. And that was that $7.1 million. And so that leaves us with a $7.7 million balance of available general fund. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end with you know, staff's recommendations. So you all know this, but just always helpful to review. Our current year budget is $1.7 billion, all funds, $872.5 million general fund, and we closed a $62 million funding gap for this year's budget without any layoffs. Just a reminder, council approved a very balanced plan to address the budget deficit this year. And so it was roughly 50-50 one-time and ongoing. Those one-time solutions, they buy us time, but they really begin our budget gap for the next year. As we move into this year, you know, I have some good news. I usually have bad news, but I have some good news. When we were reviewing our revenues, we are seeing better than budget projections for property tax, utility users tax, transfer tax, and transit occupancy tax. However, we're seeing our cannabis business operations tax come in below budget. This is a chart showing the impacts for fiscal year 25-26 based on the latest forecast. So you can see those positives for UUT, property tax, transfer tax, TOT. You see the negative for cannabis BOT, but just as we heard before, the general fund experiences 60% of that loss, the children's fund the other 40%. So that Measure L transfer amount out of the general fund is less based on the lower projected cannabis BOT receipts. And that's about $900,000. And we just wanted to show some of the historic trends with some of our revenue sources. And actually, I was waiting till Councilmember Maple got back to talk about cannabis BOT. So we are, again, you know, unfortunately, we're projecting below budget cannabis BOT for this year. And, you know, this is something when we looked at across the different kind of lines of business for cannabis, so dispensaries, cultivation, manufacturing, delivery, we're seeing every line of business struggle. And, you know, we're hearing similar stories across the state. And, you know, kind of our anecdotal understanding from what we're hearing from the industry across the state is we've kind of seen demand flatline. but we're seeing pressure on prices as well, and more competition. And so a lot of businesses up and down the state are struggling, and that's showing up in their gross receipts, which are coming in lower.
Pete, can I just?
Yeah.
Just a little bit further. Then, is the approach with the Measure L, if you know this, the grantees and or from the city's point of view, to try to smooth this over time rather than take it all in 1 year? Because these grantees have been awarded certain amounts in grants. So I assume that at some point they have to absorb a reduction. But is it phased in some way rather than all extracted in 1 year or expected to be reduced in 1 year?
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we come in March around what the Measure L is looking like. So as you all know, there was a 3-year grant cycle. There was a somewhat conservative approach to the amounts that we awarded, and so we're going to take a look at that and look at some of the different options and get council feedback and direction on how we might want to approach that, especially if we're going to start seeing potentially more industry struggles on how that looks. So we'll go into a little bit more depth on that.
Okay, we'll stay tuned. All right.
So this shows historic property tax. You can see it continues to grow, continues to be strong, very stable revenue source. On this chart, we showed both the 1% Bradley Burns sales tax, that's your point of sale sales tax, and our 1% Measure U, our point of destination sales tax. Both have the same trend. This is the same trend we're seeing up and down the state as well with sales tax. And if you look back to fiscal 2021, fiscal 21-22, you see that big jump. And that I call it kind of a sugar high. And that was when inflation really started to kick in, prices went up, people were still spending, and we saw our sales tax numbers jump up. But what typically happens with inflation is then people need to tighten their belts. And so that's kind of what we've seen, and we've seen sales tax just start to struggle, flatline, decline in some cases. We are starting to get, I would put a lot of cautiouslys in there, but cautiously optimistic, we might be starting to turn the corner. Our sales tax consultants have seen a month or two of things, I wouldn't say, growing very fastly, but looking a little bit better. And so, we'll be meeting with them again in a couple of months to get another update and see if that's continuing and if, we could potentially look at making some adjustments. But for right now, we're really not seeing that growth. And I feel a little bit like Lucy in the football, because the last couple of years, we've kind of started to see that growth. We've increased our forecast only to have to pull it back because it hasn't arrived.
Let me ask another question since we're on this. Are you confident that we are receiving as much as we should in terms of sales tax remitted for online purchases, number one? And number two, does it make any sense to contemplate having an outside auditor, a firm look at, one of these firms that examines these kinds of things, not like our auditor, but one of those kinds of forensic examinations to see if we're getting everything we should?
Yeah, so we are under contract with a firm who does that. And so they'll analyze our sales tax receipts. They'll, where they find errors from the state, they'll work with us in the state to correct those errors and get us our funding. That question on the online sales is a very complicated one. Yes. And the reason I say that is, we can, if other jurisdictions build kind of distribution centers, especially if there are other jurisdictions in our county, that benefits them in two ways. Because one, they're more likely to be the point of sale, so they'll get some point of sale sales tax, that we would otherwise potentially get. And number two, that advantages them in the county pools. And so what happens is when things come from out of state, or you have private party auto sales and things like that, they go into these county pools, which then get distributed based on your percentage of point of sale. So, you know, a jurisdiction that can have a lot of e-commerce warehouses kind of benefits in both ways, and potentially to our expense on the Bradley Burns side. You know, some of the, if to the extent we have projects locally that do that, that can help correct that. And you know, I know this is an issue that's being looked at statewide as well, because so many jurisdictions kind of feel it. And you know, the kind of philosophy behind the sales tax is to fund local government, and so you don't really want that to bleed out.
I just wonder, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. I have two issues. First, I've been deeply engaged in allocation of sales tax through the League of California Cities. I was the co-chair 3 times now of the city managers working group on sales tax allocation, and we have come up with a formula relative to the fact where cities feel like they lose when a neighboring city establishes a distribution center and all of a sudden the sales tax they were getting disappears. It has to go through the Rev and Tax Committee of the League, and then it will require potentially a constitutional amendment. So it has to go through the legislature. But that notwithstanding, our audit firm does a great job representing us. We've also learned how to represent ourselves when we have big projects. We are working directly with those contractors. If they are delivering contracts over $5 million, we can self-accrue back to the city. So anytime we have a big construction project, we are, through economic development staff, taking advantage of that. And then thirdly, we are actively, and I'm not going to say who, suing a city who we believe stole a vendor and set up a sham office where we used to accrue the sales tax here. And we have gone after them both at the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration as well as our own lawsuit. So,
Well, thanks, and that was part of, you anticipated part of where I was going to go, which is changing state law regarding this issue. But it sounds like the assessment, at least from the league's point of view, is it would take a constitutional amendment.
potentially, depending on what route actually gets chosen for the allocation.
Maybe if that is the case, it would be nice if that were on the ballot in November.
There's no way that it's going to make November, I don't believe.
No.
I don't think the machinations of the league and moving through the legislature can move that fast. But I'll check in.
I think Roger knows a thing or two about that.
I'll check in. Maybe internal league
Sometimes
stuff
yes, sometimes
first.
no. Okay, all right, we won't spend more time on this issue in the moment, but why don't you go ahead, Pete?
Sure. And so next, we have a chart up with utility users tax, and really historically, that's been a tax that's kind of gone up and down without a very clear trend over really the long term. And we've had this dynamic where we're seeing lower receipts on the cable side, on the landline side, as people, cord cut, and we've seen higher taxes or higher receipts on, electric, gas, as those rates have increased. We're seeing more of what I would say overall growth trend now, which is a good thing, and that's being driven by gas and electric. So our 5-year forecast. How are we looking? So, a lot of these assumptions will look familiar. Some of them are a little bit different. So we are forecasting kind of steady state growth. So we're not putting in a recession scenario. One thing that is different about this forecast is we are incorporating costs for city proposals with our labor unions that are on the table right now during negotiations. And we are in negotiations, as the committee knows, with most of our labor groups. So we're saying the forecast baked in the cake is the city's proposals. We're excluding HAP Round 7, so the state homelessness funding. And really what we're waiting for is some more guidance from the state on, one, what will the timing of the funding be? Historically, the state has appropriated the funds and we've received them in the following fiscal year. So what that would mean is, the state is talking about appropriating the funds for fiscal year 26, 27. If they go by historic kind of patterns, we wouldn't get them until 27, 28. And, we are in communication with the state. We're spending our HAP dollars. And so, the sooner we can get them in, the better. The other kind of factor we're waiting to receive more information on is what are these additional constraints and requirements that the state may put on the funding. So, we've heard that those are going to happen. We don't know what those are yet, and so we're continuing to communicate with the state about that. As we get more information, if the information is positive, then we would be able to budget for those funds. The other thing that I'll just mention is HAP Round 6 was $1 billion. HAP Round 7 is being proposed for $500 million. So that would be, a significant cut. And as council members remember, we really got hurt in HAP Round 6 for our success in reducing the point-in-time count. So we received a 40% cut between HAP Round 5 and HAP Round 6. And, based on what we're hearing so far, it might be another 50% cut from HAP Round 6 to HAP Round 7 if the legislature and governor can't come to an agreement. We're also excluding the 7.7 of one-time year-end savings from this forecast. And again, we'll talk about that at the end. So we wanted to show you what the forecast looks like and how it changed from the last forecast we did, which was in June with the approved budget. So you see the approved budget forecast, that's the top line. You see those expense and revenue updates that we went over. We have the ones in the current year, that's 3.8. But then in future years, kind of as that growth trend continues in some of these revenues, that helps us. We have the cost of the current city labor proposals there, and you can see how that all balances out. So we're projecting to finish the current year slightly positive, but then we would have a $66.2 million gap we would need to close to balance the budget year, again, excluding potential HAP funding. This just graphically shows the updated forecast, the chart we saw before. The one thing that I'll point out here is those future years, those are if the city does nothing. So if the city does nothing, then we would have a $102 million budget gap in fiscal year 29-2030. But the city isn't going to do nothing. Council will, adopt ongoing revenue strategies, ongoing expense strategies, and those ongoing strategies will improve those future years in the forecast. And I'll hand it off to Murthala to talk about how we're going to balance.
Thank you, Pete. Okay, so for the fiscal year 27 budget process, we asked all departments and charter offices to submit reduction plans that was 15% of their general fund reliance. This is the same process that we have been conducting over the last 2 years. We're also looking at citywide strategies, and so that includes projects that have been old or have monies left over in it, and other ongoing budget reduction strategies that we will be discussing with the city manager. The target this year is $85.3 million, which should provide more options than the projected deficit of $66.2, and we're currently going through the review process with departments. You'll see these options in the next, either later this month or next month when we bring them to council. Okay. And as we have done in the past couple years, we've asked departments to take the following guiding principles in consideration while developing their priorities. Departments, to the best of their ability, should preserve core services and minimize impacts to the public and staff. Also, departments should align their proposals with council priorities. And of course, if there are other priorities that should be considered, please let us know. Here's the budget schedule for the next 5 months. So today we're presenting the updated forecast and budget gap. Next month you'll hear from the departments. Their presentations, like Pete mentioned, will be more focused on their reduction plans and the impact to the community and their departments themselves. At the end of April, the proposed budget will be released, and we will have budget hearings take place in May, and hopefully budget adoption will be conducted in early June. And this is just the hearing calendar with the actual dates and times for everybody to see. All right. We still have a few things that we just want to highlight in regards to other budgetary concerns. We still have an unfunded pension and capital needs balance. And as Pete mentioned before, it is unknown what the type of assistance that we will receive from the state, and also in regards to the timing of when we would receive those resources. Potential cuts to federal programs could impact our city programs as well. We just won't know what that looks like until the federal government passes their budget. And then, of course, there's always the risk of recession. So with our economic uncertainty reserve being below the council policy minimum, it does put the city in a bind if a recession does hit. So, and just a reminder that the budget deficit that the city has been working on closing for the last several years, and also for this next upcoming year, is structural in nature, which means that the city's expenses are more than what we bring in revenues. Okay. So as requested from the fall, we are bringing back the topic of the two-year budget. Now that we have the updated forecast, we can provide real numbers to what that budget year +1 deficit tolerance would look like. As just a reminder, council was interested in exploring option 2, which is to determine a deficit percentage threshold for the second year budget. And what that means is that instead of attempting to balance the entire second year budget, there would be a percentage threshold that the deficit must be under. So just based on our forecast, the fiscal year 28 expenditures are at $931 million. So if council picks a threshold of 1% of that $931 million, that would be $9.3 million. And so what that means is that all of the reductions in fiscal year 27 would have to be ongoing in nature. So all 66.2 million would need to be ongoing. And then in addition, in fiscal year 28, there would need to be an additional 6.3 million. Now, if council picks a threshold of 5%, the amount that the threshold will be 46.6 million, and what that means is that the amount of ongoing reductions would just need to be 35.2 million. So depending on council's direction, will determine how much of the reductions will be ongoing in nature.
So the only comment I have is that this kind of formula presumes that all 66.2 million are ongoing. So if you were to say, have 10 million of one time, and you were to choose the 1% threshold, you would need to identify an additional 16 million in the following fiscal year to get to that 1% tolerance. So
Or on the flip side, if you had a unanticipated revenue, that would reduce the
yes.
the deficit, and which is something I want to talk about in a moment, and when the presentation's finished. But that, so it could go. I mean, you could go either way depending on the various factors.
Correct.
Correct, and I think
If you chose 5% as a tolerance, then of the roughly, if we did that, roughly half of our reductions this year would need to be ongoing, and roughly half one time.
correct, yeah, and you know, as you're pointing out, Chair, the policy decision here, if council wanted to adopt this, is how much do we want to take on now as far as solving the structural problem? How much ongoing? That's really kind of at the heart of the policy question.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And so now we get to our recommendations. So we are requesting for the Budget and Audit Committee move this forward to council to approve our ACFR, to approve the proposed revenue and expense adjustments, to reserve the 7.7 million of one-time year-end savings for any additional labor negotiations cost and budget balancing, and then also to provide direction on whether to set a budget year +1 deficit tolerance.
Yeah, and if I could just add, so the 7.7, it's because we don't know if there might be additional cost to the current fiscal year with labor negotiations, and so we really want to hold that back so that's available. And then if I can just take a moment of personal privilege, I do want to thank and recognize both the accounting team They've received an unmodified, clean opinion on our ACFR, implemented 2 new GASB standards this year, as well as our budget team, who's just been working nonstop, trying to get all these options together for council. So I want to just thank and acknowledge both of them.
Is there anything else you want to say about the ACFR, since we've also taken that item up?
Yeah, I mean, there's some more kind of detail behind how we ended the year. But yeah, I will say there were 2 new governmental accounting standards boards rules that we had to implement, one on compensated absences and the other on kind of risk disclosures. So they implemented both of that. We have an independent audit firm, MGO, review it. Again, they offered, or they issued a clean, unmodified opinion, which is just a testament to how Osvaldo and the team put it together.
Okay, so that completes all you want to present?
Yes.
Okay, we, as you might guess, have some questions and comments, but I just wanted to start with one, looking at the 5-year forecast. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears for your projection for 26-27 that more than half of that, the ultimate 66+ million gap, is a funding gap related to homeless services.
So it's actually probably a bit more than that. And so the reason I say that is our sheltering program, our homeless services costs, they're about $48 million.
Right.
Historically, how we funded it has been, cobbling together a number of funding sources. So HAP, state money, has always been really a cornerstone in how we funded it. And in past years, we've had whole person care money. We've had some other dollars that we've been able to layer on top of that state funding. What's happened is those other funding sources have gone away and the state funding sources have gone down. And so in the current year budget, we have our 48 million roughly of costs and a little under 13 million of HAP funding that is supporting those. In our forecast for 26-27, we have $0 of HAP funding in there now. So it's that entire cost is being borne by the general fund.
And that's just exactly what I wanted to circle, that you're showing almost 37 million in the homeless services gap in the projection for 26-27, and 11 million in resources, which is all city money, is all general fund money, I gather. So to the point we were having talked about earlier, if there is HAP funding or any other state funding that accrues to us or federal, that maybe on the margin in relative terms, if it goes to $6 or $7 million, but it still would be an improvement.
Definitely, yeah. We're hoping that we get those state dollars. We can budget them for the coming year, and we're hoping that maybe the legislature and governor could provide more.
Well, that's exactly the other point, which is it really underscores what we need to be talking to our legislative delegation about, the kind of commitment the city has made to addressing homelessness, and how the city, the state's commitment, despite the rhetoric, is being reduced over time. That exacerbates the challenge for us overall in delivering what the people of the city expect in the way of services and the level of services. So I think I'd put a big red circle around that in talking about this. Okay.
If I can add to the list of things we need to talk to the legislative delegation about, some cities have not spent their money in a timely manner. We have. And one of the conundrums we're facing is when we will actually get this money, because the cash may not come to us until the 27-28 fiscal year, which means even though we get it, we can't accrue it into 26-27. So we want to fight for those dollars to go to cities in real time who are using it.
And it's actually beyond that, it's the timeliness of the rounds of HAP, among other things. So thank you for that additional point. Okay, let's go to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Let's see. So I had a budget briefing and I asked these questions, but wanted to make sure I put it out in the open. In terms of the budget presentations that we're going to be hearing at council, the mayor and council decided on our priorities of homelessness, economic development, public safety. Is it possible, or can you give us a glimpse of like what we can expect in the presentations that come to the mayor and council? Because I think it'd be nice to be able to categorize them by bucket of our priorities so that we can see how much we're doing in each department based on that objective.
Sure, so thank you. So this year, as we've kind of promised you all, the departmental presentations are going to look quite a bit different. So in prior years, it's been, here are all the things that we're doing as a department. This year, they're going to be much more budget focused. And so departments are going to go over their budget. They're going to go over the impacts of of preliminary reduction strategies. And then Vice Mayor, to your point, one of the things we're going to talk with the departments about is, we want to kind of end with how are we going to deliver services? How are we going to meet council priorities even in this environment after our reductions? And so we're going to talk with the departments about how to articulate that so that we can show council and the public, even kind of with everything going on, how are we going to advance those priorities?
And then my second question is, Boston does their budget a little differently. It's like a pie chart based on categories to show like a realistic example of how much money is actually available. So for example, I mean, we have the $1.6 billion budget, but of that, some of it is locked in because of unfunded liability. Some of it is locked in because of healthcare. Some of it is locked in, just different buckets of pensions and things that are non-negotiable. Like the city cannot touch it for any way, shape, or form. I would like to see a budget where it's dissected. So I want to know how much money is actually available for us to work with. Wanted to see if you have.
Yeah, so we're thinking of some other ways to visualize things. We're the finance people. We're not always the best at the artistic representations, and we do have some pie charts that we put together that I think we can do a better job of putting them native on the website so people don't have to click through a bunch of our presentations. But I did want to address some of what you had asked about around what I would call non-discretionary, right? We can't not pay our unfunded pension liability payment, even if all the employees were to go away. We still need to make this payment. These are for debts that were already incurred. So we took a look in the general fund, and our general fund, a little under 875 million, and roughly 110 million of that is for unfunded pension and unfunded OPEB benefits. Okay. Our debt service is about 16.5 million. Our risk fund contribution is 47.5. Our workers' comp is 18.5. So those total roughly 195 million. That's probably not an exhaustive list of things that costs that can't go away, because we have mandates as well, right? We have to produce an act for, and some of those things are a little harder to quantify. But if I were to say, here are the big ticket items that are just there, we can't not do these things, it would be those things for around 195 million.
Okay, that's perfect. If we can make that its own category within the budget, I think that'd be great. Sure, because I think it's like cutting 1.6 bill minus that amount is how much we actually have. And then, I mean, if you want to include enterprise funds, which, I mean, those are also locked in, include those and then subtract it from that too.
Yeah, and that's why I was thinking the general fund is probably the one, because that's where you all have the most discretion.
Right.
So that 872.5, less that 195.
Yeah, and that'd be great because obviously it seems like a big number to the public, and the actual dollar amount that we're actually just working off of is a lot less than that. And so for me, telling that story and letting people know is really important. And then my last question, actually I guess question and then comment, is, there's some departments like our charter officers where people just got hired. For example, I know first our city auditor had a vacancy. She filled it. I've been very vocal about her filling her position so that we can get the audits done. Some departments submitting a 15% reduction equals wiping out an entire department. So how is the city manager's office going about working with the other charter officers and the small departments to be able to address this?
Yeah, so, we have meetings with the city manager and the departments where they can walk through their reduction options and what those impacts are, so that the city manager can fully understand, the consequences of potentially choosing one of those options. One of the reasons, though, we wanted to kind of, instead of just saying, hey, we want to do across the board 10% cut, we wanted to get these different options was so that you all have options, because a 10% cut for, the auditor's agency might mean they just can't operate anymore, whereas that may not be the same for another department.
Okay, and so those reductions, once they're submitted, are they gonna come straight here?
So what we're doing right now is we're working on them, and we're working with the departments to kind of clarify all of them. And we are going to publish them early March. So what we're planning on doing is coming to council with those department presentations. Before that, we're going to have kind of what I would call a budget context presentation. And we'll be publishing the reduction options along with those reports.
Okay, and then my last comment is, I don't want to go into the next budget cycle knowing that we have a $70 million budget deficit. I'd be comfortable with a 1% to 2% cut based on the numbers that you presented to us. Want to hear from my colleagues on where you guys feel about that. But I don't want to go into the next budget cycle knowing that we have $70 million in debt already. And so I know there's been a lot of conversations about ripping the Band-Aid, so people call it. And I think it's time to just do it and get used to the new normal. And it's going to be tough, but we have to figure it out as a city. So my preference would be 1% to 2% of total savings to be ongoing.
Okay, thank you. And it sounds like a pie chart of the revenue sources, a pie chart of the expenditures, a pie chart of what discretionary and not so discretionary, something that you can get the graphic artists out working on in the next month or so. Mayor Pro Tem.
Great, thank you. And actually, it's good that we started off at this one here, just because this is an exercise. The deficit reduction strategy for the second year is an example of actively managing our expenses. But one thing that I don't want us to do is to be passive in our revenue expectations. Most of what we hear at the budget is assumptions of where we are, but they're not. But it doesn't really come across as an active management of new revenue, except for the work that the Treasurer's Office has done on the bond side and I think on the investment side. And so that small team has done tremendous amount of work. I think it's 6 or 7 people that really have moved the needle on the positive side on the investments. But when it comes to on the retail, on the sales, both Bradley Burns, Measures U, and also property tax revenue, I guess my question here, given the fact that the council set economic development as a strong priority, where is the finance team? How is the finance team more deeply engaged in changing that trajectory? And we brought in the tax consultant last time to give us a better understanding on what we saw short-term and long-term, and I think that's helped us better forecast. So can maybe you discuss a little bit about what is our active long-term and trajectory here?
Yeah, I think we work closely with the economic development team, so they do meet with us and the sales tax consultant. Lainey had mentioned a couple of the programs that we work on to try to make sure. So, for example, the rail yards project, we have them in. They're working with our sales tax consultant for what Lainey said, for all of those contracts over a certain amount, so that we actually ensure that we recognize that sales tax revenue. But I think as far as your question is, hey, how are we, and we manage a lot of the special districts, we work on the EIFDs and these things. Those are kind of where we intersect with economic development. I think, what I hear from you is, well, what is our long-term plan as a city to incentivize businesses to move here, right? To grow our commercial businesses, get more transactions, more sales tax, more other revenues. So we can help facilitate some of those things through special districts, through analysis and help there. But the actual plans are going to be more on the economic development side.
If I can, I know OIED is working on a workshop that they're going to come back and talk about just what you're asking. We help facilitate. They are, that is their management, kind of what they're here to do for us. So.
Good. Yeah. And then the only thought on what percentage we move is all of this equates to service delivery to the public. So rather than just choosing a number, I think what I hope we do is we identify, okay, well then what service delivery are we going to go without? And what processes we can do to tighten and maybe be more effective. But that's really our point of conversation here is if we're going to adjust the work of the city, then what is it that we will not be providing the public? Thank you.
Do you have an opinion on the out-year percentage?
I'm much more in, and again, I don't want to just throw numbers out there, but I do think it's going to take us a few years to adjust that. And so the fact that we're actually starting this exercise is important, but if we just go 1 or 2 years, then, I mean, the numbers are right there about what we're going to eliminate immediately. And frankly, when we eliminate things immediately, the people who have the hardest time adjusting are those on the lowest income side. And so I worry about that. Those who have more resources to adjust where the city provides services, I think they're going to be fine. So again, I don't want to speculate. I want to look at what that balance is. If in fact the 35,000 is about half of it, then to our point, if we actually do receive the revenue from the state, then that addresses a big chunk of our concern. If you look at, say, 18%, or let's look at what the CAFR brought in this year, 14 million. So every year we've always had a positive CAFR. What's been our CAFR number? Not every year, but many of our years, okay? At least the last 9 of the 10 I've been here. Okay, at least 9 of the 10 have been here. They've all been very positive, and some of them extremely positive. But conservatively, I mean, if you were gonna shoot a target for next year's CAFR.
I'll tell you what my fear is. So, the last 2 years where we've been very positive, a large portion of that has been essentially repayment from paper investment losses we took from prior years. My concern is seeing the 2.8 million operational surplus. So that's positive, but that's kind of what I would consider our core result with the investment repayment, kind of a nice to have. But to your point, I mean, we can't really end the year negative. We need to figure out a way to end it positive. So, we're getting tighter and tighter as we've been trying to close deficits. We've been, getting more and more precise in our budgeting. We've incorporated things like building in a vacancy factor so that we're essentially taking that savings when we're budgeting versus kind of getting it as a one-time bonus at the end of the year. So I can't give you a number.
And to that point, I'll save you there so that you don't have to save a number. But to that point, I do want to recognize the finance team because we have particularly now when we need it the most, we have improved our accounting in a much more effective way for us. So I think if there's anything here that's a highlight is how much we how much we've been able to budget better in that sense. So to my point again, I think we need to look at balancing what does the trade-off mean, and if we did, and then how long that would take us. Because yes, the trade-off is here is if we went to a 1 or 2% this next year, we can completely eliminate or attempt to eliminate our debts or impacts in the out years. And there's a benefit to that, but there, you know, in the time value of money, but the challenge is then you really are affecting the public. On the flip side, if we went 5 or more, then the cost for us to right size is going to be much more in the out years. So I'm more interested on what does it mean to the average person when we actually have to make difficult decisions. Yeah.
Councilmember Maple.
All right, thank you, Chair. Can you go to the second to last slide where you list the items? This is it?
Yep.
Oh, wait, I think this is it. Nope, that's not it. Just kidding. The one that bullet points out what you're asking of us, which is that's it.
Recommendations.
Perfect. Okay. I want to make sure I'm aligning my comments with what you need. Thank you for the presentation. I want to align myself with a lot of what my colleagues have said, so I won't go into a lot of detail, recognizing that we have closed session and other items today. A couple things that came to mind. I want to agree with Vice Mayor Talamontes on visual representations and ways that we can simplify how we understand the budget. Those of us, myself included, who are not numbers people, I'm just, you know, it always scared me in school. I loved, math was not my subject, but it's really important that we understand what we're looking at, and also the public, right? Because this is, obviously, you are experts and you can dig in deep and you can understand what all those numbers mean, but it's really challenging for, you know, a single mom in my district to make sure that she understands the budget and what it means to her and her family. And so I think to the extent that we can continue to improve that, that would be wonderful. And one idea that I had as I was looking out in the audience is I recognize that we have our wonderful staff from the Arts and Culture Division here. We also have our PIOs of the city. So I wonder if there are organic partnerships that can happen with our, within our own city staff and departments to help with this. Because I know that, you know, while you are really great at being numbers people, maybe the visual side isn't your wheelhouse. But we certainly do have that capacity.
I'm happy for any help Megan can give me.
Yeah. Oh.
Don't ask the engineers.
Okay, great. So maybe some opportunities to partner there. One thing that came to mind as we looking at that list of the tax revenues, overall a rosier-ish picture than we previously anticipated, which is great. Not being cautiously optimistic because we recognize that we're not out of the woods yet, but still looking like things are going in the right direction. Seeing that the cannabis tax revenues were down was gave me some pause, and it made me think maybe some direction on that front is to make sure that we're connecting, whether that's your office or, you know, through our Office of Cannabis Management, that we're connecting with those businesses in Sacramento and understanding from them, are there things that we can do from a policy standpoint or otherwise to help the industry succeed? Because yes, it is challenged across the state, and there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, one being that at the end of the day, it's a plant, so it's a commodity, and, you know, it's kind of a race to the bottom in that way. We also don't have enough places in California to get the product to market because a lot of jurisdictions don't license retail, which makes it really challenging for companies. And there's a bunch of other stuff too, which I won't get into, but there might be things that we can do to make it just a little bit easier to improve those outcomes and hopefully those tax revenues, which not only will help the budget overall, will help like the Children's Fund, for example, which I know is a priority for a lot of this council. So love that. The last thing that I'll say is I know we're already working on this. I really want to thank Lainey. I want to thank our city committee on equity and inclusion, racial equity, that equity has to be a part of this. And I want to make sure that that is incorporated in what we're doing moving forward to the extent that we can. I know that we're still looking at those tools and how they can be applied to the budget and to what extent they can. But I'm very keenly interested because, like I've said many times before, when we look at something like, let's say, cuts to community centers, what that means in some of the communities I represent, like Oak Park, it could mean that the kids are not going they're going without meals, or that you know, moms don't have access to childcare, and it may not mean the same thing for a community center in a more resourced part of the city. And so I just hope that we're taking a look at the decisions that we're all making on this committee and the city council as a whole, and we're able to put that in context using some of the tools that we have, like the SEED tool and others. So I just hope that we continue to keep that top of mind. Last thing on the direction for the budget, I agree with the vice mayor. I think it's tough, but we have to, if we're gonna kind of right the ship, we have to make sure that we're padding and that we have the space that we need to make hard decisions. And so I'm comfortable. Were you at one or 2%? Yeah, love your recommendation on that. But having some padding there, I think makes a lot of sense, and especially as we look at in the out years. So thank you.
Thank you all. I have some other comments, but let's take public comment first.
Thank you, Chair. I have one speaker on item 8, Cao Yi Tao.
Welcome.
Hello, Chair Dickinson and City Council members. My name is Cao Yi Tao. I am a resident of District 2. I also am with Hmong Innovating Politics and the Sacramento Racial Equity Alliance. And I wanted to come out here to really underscore the need for us to put our attention to the community participation process. To the point that Councilmember Maple was making is that this is such an essential part of how we build deeper partnership with the city, is making sure that our residents are part of this process. And if we focus on the process, it's also going to get us to the outcome of a strong budget. I want to ask that the committee work with the city manager's office to put forth a plan for promoting community awareness and participation in this year's budget process. We have these meetings recorded, and this process happens every year, but there's not a clearly articulated plan for how this information is going to community, which means that it's happening in very inconsistent ways. And I think as policymakers, we should make sure we try to standardize and make that process very clear. Even if we can't make bold promises, we can at least let the community know that this is how we are informing them. And an example of what this could look like is collaborating with community organizations to host a Budget 101. And I feel like we should tap into the materials and framework that we developed through the participatory budgeting pilot. It's not too much to ask because that information is already there. It's just a matter of putting that work together. And additionally, I also want to follow up on the budget community survey. I know that survey was just closed, and I think it's really important to make time to review the methodology, the results, and how we're going to apply that for this process.
Thank you. So I actually think the comments are well taken in terms of trying to engage the public in the budget process. And so not necessarily in the moment, but perhaps we can have some further discussion about how there is the survey that the speaker referenced, and there's always the opportunity, I think, for community presentations to organizations or in general, but the idea of having a more systematic approach makes sense. So maybe we can talk about that in the next several days or week. Okay. I just wanted to add that in terms of the percentage looking at next year, it seems to me, as I've thought about it over the weekend, that it's more informative than it is a direction. That what you've done by giving us what the percentage markers are is you've really informed us based upon the numbers we have now of what would need to be ongoing cuts if we pick a particular percentage or not. And that makes me disinclined to pick a percentage, but actually ask you to continue to show us that, because it seems to me that becomes a factor in looking at the array of potential reductions that we might have to choose from, that you're going to get from the departments in the weeks ahead, and to make some judgments in the context of what that means per the Mayor Pro Tem's comments about what's the impact on services versus what's the challenge of reducing costs over the long haul versus what's the availability of one-time solutions this year, and maybe even the expectation of what might be one-time solutions next year, which is very hard, it seems to me, to project. So I don't know that it makes, from my point of view, sense to lock in on a particular percentage right now. Now, at least two members have said that 1 to 2 range is where they would like to go. And I infer from those comments that their interest is in looking at reductions that get us down to a point where we're not dependent either on searching out one-time solutions increasingly or having more draconian cuts in a particular year. Makes perfect sense. But I think we're really still too early on, if we can say that at the start of February, to know what the landscape might look like in May, at least in some significant ways, and what the trade-offs really are. So I would ask that you continue to show us the 1 through 5, recognizing that there are members of the council who are inclined to focus in on a particular level to try to get to that second year being less likely to rely on one-time cuts or larger ongoing reductions in the budget year. The other comments, I think, from the members are certainly well taken, and the highlighting, again, not to be repetitive of where so much of this gap is in what we're doing related to homelessness. I think we just need to be making sure everybody understands that's the biggest nut to crack in this ongoing budget process. And this is a starting point. I mean, by the way, I want to thank all the staff, Pete, all your staff, everybody, accounting staff, everybody who's been working on this, because this is not the start for you. I know you've been working on it for a long, long time, and it's consuming. But for many in the public, it is the starting point. And the conversations that we're going to have over the next 3 months are going to be particularly important in reaching that goal in June, not just of having a balanced budget, which we have to, but in making sure that we're balancing in a way that preserves service levels to the maximum extent possible, incorporates the equity considerations that have been highlighted, and delivers what people in the city really need in order to flourish in every sense. That's our challenge, and that is always an evolutionary process in my experience. Blaney, did you want to add something?
I do. I just want to say, staff was given a particular direction on the tolerance, so we will be back next week looking either for 5 with a particular point of view, a yay or a nay, and what level, because staff has to build that into what we want to present to you at the end of April. There is every bit of opportunity to say nay, but for now, but in April or in May, add additional reductions. So there are a couple of different paths to have the same outcome, but staff will be looking for direction next week at council.
Okay. All right, we'll see if there's a count to 5. All right. We have some recommendations. They went away. They were up there.
It was to approve the ACFR,
Yeah.
approve the revenue and expense adjustments for the current year, and then reserve the $7.7 million of one-time to, potentially cover additional labor costs this year, with a remainder just to help with budget balancing.
Okay, thanks, Pete. And is there a motion to adopt the recommendations? All right. Moved by the Pro Tem, seconded by Councilmember Maple. Any further discussion or question? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you all.
Chair, can I confirm that was for both items 7 and 8?
I think that was the totality of all the recommendations for 7 and 8, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item is a council member proposal request related to illegal dumping, and this is, if I can just make an opening comment or two, this is a proposal that's being advanced by Councilmember Maple, Councilmember Vang, and me, related to, at the core, elevating our attention and activity related to illegal dumping across the city. I will tell you that in District 2, illegal dumping is an epidemic. And I view it, frankly, I view it as an insult. By those who engage in illegal dumping, they are insulting our neighborhoods, they're insulting our businesses, and demonstrating that they think that it is acceptable to degrade our environment. The city historically has addressed illegal dumping, but not truly in a coordinated fashion. And I think without the emphasis that it needs and deserves. So this proposal from the three of us is to initially engage in a gaps analysis and start to identify with the staff's help where we're missing, where we could do better, where we could coordinate more effectively. Now, our manner in the city of addressing homelessness is divided. DCR is responsible for trash and detritus that shows up on property where there have been homeless encampments or evidence of homelessness. Solid Waste is in charge of taking it on the streets, and so on. And so it's not always as effective or as efficient, I think, as it can be. And we got through talking about the budget and the challenges there, but one of the things that we always have to be conscious of, even in good budget times, frankly, is how we can be more effective and more efficient with the resources we've got. This is something I can tell you, and I suspect it's true for probably everyone on the council, I hear a lot about. I hear about this all the time. And I am out on the streets of the district I represent, and I see it all the time. And so it's just one of those areas where we talk about the need to do a better job than we have done historically, and I think this is a path that we have suggested among the three of us that can lead us to that better outcome. So with that, I want to invite Councilmember Maple as a co-author to offer any comments she would like to make.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll be very brief because I think you touched on everything that I wanted to say, but it's mentioned in the proposal, but this is something that disproportionately impacts communities like many of us up here represent, working class communities, underserved communities. And so I think when you're a young person or your mom or whatever, and you're looking outside and you see a couch or, a bag of trash on the ground, it really reflects on how you feel about if the community invests in you, if the city invests in you. And it's really like a visual representation of how you feel. And so I think it's so important beyond the obvious health and public safety, all the reasons why we don't want there to be trash on our streets, but also, there are non-tangible things that are also important considerations. And so I know I get a lot of calls, I'm sure many of my colleagues do here, and I think now is a really great time for us to take a look at not only what we're doing, but the processes that we have in place and ensure that it makes sense. The other thing that I think is really important is we should be always taking a look at how we can use technology to improve what we're doing and ease on our employees and our communities, and so I hope that's a part of it too. And so last thing I want to say is our code enforcement department does a great job as it relates to illegal dumping. I know that, when we report things, oftentimes we see them removed within 24 hours, which is great. But the problem being is then 24 hours later, you'll see something there again. And so we have to be looking beyond not just how we respond in the moment, but what comes next and how we prevent it from happening. And so I'm really looking forward to this. Hope that we can pass it through this committee and move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, one, I want to just commend, you, Mr. Chair, for jumping on this, and the authors, Maple and Vang as well. And since the Brown Act number is 4, I'd like to be added as a co-author onto this, but also when we used to have a solid waste authority, there was money that was through the enterprise funds directed by that authority to go after some of these areas. Then it went into when the city and the county decided to split, or let me just say the county decided to, leave the marriage there per se. then as they say, that was the way it was described during the split. Then we kept our part and they kept their part. But in that conversation, we were discussing how do we jointly tackle a lot of those areas and use those funds to go after that. And I think since that split, I think we've lost that connection as well. And many of our districts border unincorporated areas. While I think we were making some progress, that split actually, lacked our focus to be able to work collectively. Some of the things we did there, we tried to fund the PBIDs with more resources as well. The challenge with that, I think at the time, was that it was through county procurement. I think the city procurement had easier issues. So I'd like to, just some thoughts here is like, now that it's in the city procurement, are there easier ways to use our PBIDs that can maybe move faster on some of the response issues? The other issue at the time was how do we actually go after, the people who are participating in illegal dumping, and we didn't have all the different technologies that we have now. The camera technology, drone technology, different tools I think are now at our disposal. So I think this is an opportunity for us to have that conversation that we didn't have at the time when we had the Solid Waste Authority. The last point I'll say, and I don't want to say there's like hidden money somewhere, but as I understand it, when we took over our share of the enterprise fund, we have a very healthy enterprise fund. And before, we could use those resources to go after and tackle particular problem areas throughout the city and county, and now we have not. So I'm actually very, interested, because we used to have up to the tune, I think it was an average of 1.2 million that the city would have of unallocated funding that we could use to every year to go after particular problems. So, I'd like to dive into, okay, I'd like to know more how those enterprise funds are being allocated, because we did end up with a significant positive end. And I know the enterprise funds are on the commercial corridor side, sometimes can only be used for business related purposes versus the residential. But many of these neighborhoods are impacted on those business corridor sides. So with that, I guess I'm looking here and at the appropriate motion, and I would be glad to support whatever the chair thinks is the appropriate option here, whether it's number one, and move forward, Mr. Chair, but glad to support that or second any direction you have.
Thank you for that, and Vice Mayor.
I'll second. Since you guys are Brown acted out and there's only 4 allowed on the council member proposal, but thank you for bringing this to the forefront. Illegal dumping just continues to be a problem in the city of Sacramento. I mean, especially in some of the hardest hit neighborhoods. And I agree, when I drive by D2, we need desperate help to do more. But that's also where we got to figure out how to penalize the people that are doing this so that they stop doing this. So happy to second it and happy to move this forward.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make note of a couple things. One, I really appreciate the receptivity the staff has already shown to taking on this issue, and we've actually done a couple things. We ought to just highlight that they haven't been static about this. As you all know, we have changes to the ordinance to allow illegal dumpers to be identified by license of a car rather than individual identified. We're on the way to approving that change in our local ordinance. And for those of us who live in the north part of the city, we have worked out with the county that when people get their coupon to make one free trip to the landfill, they'll be able, starting in July, to go to the North Area Transfer Station, which the county operates as opposed to the city. So it'll be much more convenient and hopefully much more utilized as a result. So I think, if I'm not wrong, the appropriate motion is number 2. Yes. To direct the appropriate council appointive officer, for the staff to work with the appropriate appointed officers and forward this to the council. And we'll
so moved.
We'll add Councilmember Guerra as a as a co-author to get to 4. All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Guerra and seconded by the Vice Mayor. Do we have any public testimony on this?
I have no speakers on this item, Chair.
All right, in that case, if there's nothing further, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. And we have one more critical item. And that is a selection of a vice chair for calendar year 2026. Is there a nomination?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I was going to nominate Vice Mayor Karina Telemantes to be the vice chair.
Okay, we have a nomination. Nominations don't require a second. Is there any debate, or questions or comments on the motion?
I like to give a really long, lengthy speech about this nomination and how honored I am. Just kidding, just kidding.
We'll make you earn it. We'll make you earn it, I'm sure.
You got it, Chair.
All right. If there's nothing further, and we have any public comment on this item?
I have no public comment on this
Okay.
item.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those say no, and abstentions? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Vice Chair. We need any committee comments, questions, or reports?
And Chair, if we can get one council member in here, we could adjourn this
Okay.
meeting into closed session.
Okay.
That way we don't have to adjourn and then re-adjourn.
And we have no public comments for items not on the agenda,
That's
I'm
correct.
assuming?
I have
Okay.
no public comment
We
for
need one.
matters not on the agenda.
There we go. We've got a sufficient number for a quorum of the council.
So thank you, Chair. We will now adjourn to closed session. There are 4 items on the agenda. I have a quorum of council members in chambers. Those items are 1, public employee performance evaluation, Government Code Section 54957B1, title is City Auditor. Conference with labor negotiators, Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency designated representative is Mayor McCarty, title is City Auditor. Public employee appointment, Government Code Section 54957B1, title Executive Director of the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. Item 4 is public employee appointment, Government Code Section 54957B1, title Executive Director of Sacramento Housing Authority. You may adjourn to closed session.
And the Budget and Audit Committee is adjourned to closed session of the council. I have a short list of 3 things to talk to you about.